Hi everyone, this is Yonit from Lessonface, and I'm here today to help you sound better on bass. Tip number one is clean sound. So I get a lot of students to come to me and they're already, shedding and they play with bands, but the most common mistake I see is a kind of a technique mistake, and that's when they play strings. Sometimes if you don't play it well, you have kind of like, a different string, kind of by mistake, being tapped there and making some noise. Since we're a melodic instrument, we want to be very precise with our sound, and clean sound is our number one thing that's going to make your playing sound better. Okay? So I'm going to show you how I use my really right hand technique to make it sound nice and clean, and perhaps you see something that you overlooked before. Okay, so I'm actually going to show you how to mute properly the strings by using your right hand. Okay, so first of all, the easiest, I guess, because you don't really find your fingers in this area when you play the E string. There's not much you need to do. Maybe you can, mute the other strings with your left hand over here. But there's really not much of energy that needs to be consumed when you do it. But definitely, if you can just tap slightly with your left hand, then this is already going to make it cleaner, rather than you can hear the harmonics when I don't mute it, right? So just put your left hand and it's going to disappear. Okay, this is for the E string. Now, when I'm going to the A string, the number one thing I want to be careful of is to ring that E string. Okay, so for example, if you put your thumb here, you're kind of creating a hazard for you to accidentally bump into the E string. You see? Just like that. So what I recommend to do is put your thumb. The thumb is very important, even though you don't seem to really use it when you play bass. Put your thumb on the E string, okay? And then when you play the A string, you're not going to hit it. You can still kind of mute the other strings with your left hand. But you see that the E string is really not going to move because you're muting it with your thumb. Okay, now I know a lot of you probably are used to just keeping your thumb on the pickup, but really this is the best way to mute the string without causing a lot of tension on your right hand. You don't want to cause a lot of tension in your right hand when you're trying to mute, because that's just energy going to waste. Okay, so basically this is what you do when you want to play the A string, but you want to mute the E string. Okay, now if you want to go higher up, for example, you want to play the D string, I would just put my thumb on the A string, okay? That creates the most comfortable environment for me to play in, without causing a lot of stress on my right hand. Okay, so again, if I'm playing the D string, I put my thumb on the A string, and it's kind of also resting on the E string, and you see that's kind of easy, very clean, very nice. And the last one, if you're playing the G string, you can't really put your thumb on the D string, because then you're leaving the E string kind of like in a weird situation over there. So you actually keep your thumb on the A string, but you can see that I'm using my pinky and the third finger over here to mute the D string. Now I'm not really doing, I realize that I'm not really doing it consciously. It's just kind of like hanging in there. Again, it's kind of like the whole trying to not waste energy on my right hand that just goes in there. And you see that when I go to different strings, my hand jumps around. Alright, so if I'll play the G string, you'll see that I have the third finger over here watching the D string. And then I'm going to the D string. And then again, you can leave it on the back. Okay? So you can see that this would already create a clean sound. And again, my left hand is kind of just roaming around here, making sure nobody's making any other additional noise. So because I have the security coming from both hands, there really is no way of anything ringing. Okay, so that's my number one tip. I know that this could be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're used to playing in a different way. The way that I suggest to practice it is, well, first of all, you're going to see I have a bass line that I'm going to be practicing with. If you want, you can be practicing with it too. I have the play along that I'm going to be using and the bass line that I wrote. You can find it in the link right here in the info of this video, and you can practice after I show you how to do this. But you can also take every bass line that you've been playing with and just slow it down and try to really focus on your right hand and see what your right hand is doing. The more simple the bass line, the better, because you want to have all your attention to the right hand. So the second tip that I have for you is control the length of your notes. Now, why does it go hand in hand with the first tip of basically playing clean? Because it really has to do with the same technique. Okay, it's, again, I'm going to the right hand. So, if you want to control the length of your notes, which is again a very common mistake that I see with bass players, that everything is kind of just like sounds the same and kind of blendy. I'll show you in a second what I mean. If you want to control the length of your note, it's really just muting it, right? Because that's how you make a note shorter. So you mute it by already having your next finger ready to go. Okay, so I'm going to do it very slow. I'm going to use the D string for this example, playing E. Okay, you can do it obviously with every string. So it's kind of like going back into the position where you're gonna play the next note. Now, that's why it's very important to use both fingers. I know that there's a lot of people that like to play in the James Jamerson style, and he played only with one finger. But the two fingers are actually really important also because not just to, you know, not to have only one finger doing all the effort, but to spread it to two fingers. But also, it's a great way of controlling the length of the sound. Okay? Again, this may be something that is overlooked, but this actually has to do a lot with the way that you play a bass line. A bass line can be written or can exist with, you know, these notes, but there really is a huge room for creativity with the way that you play it, the length of the note. You can play staccato, you can play tenuto, which is like the whole length of the note. There's so much room for interpretation, for your creativity to really exist in, that it makes the whole bass line sound different, even though you are playing the same notes. So, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be playing the same bass line. In the beginning, I'm gonna play it only with very tenuto, sort of legato, long notes, and I want you to see how it could sound good in some situations, but maybe not all the time, right? And then I'm gonna do the exact opposite. I'm gonna play very, very short notes and see how that changes the bass lines. And then for, to end it, I'm actually gonna change it up, play some notes staccato, some notes tenuto, and kind of try to balance the bass line. Okay, so tip number 3 is actually not so much about the actual play, but tip number 3 is change your strings. Pretty simple. I know that there may be people that really like the sound of very old strings and it's kind of very boomy. But I have to say that for me at least, there's nothing like the sound of nice, fresh, crispy strings. What I recommend for bass players in general, if you gig once, twice a week, of course, depending on the strings and the brand and the kind that you're using, but I would say that the average time to change strings will be, for bass guitar, will be every 6 months or so. I find it to be the nice kind of spot that works for most people. As I said, there's something very nice about the crispiness, especially if you like to play some slap. There's nothing like new strings. But if you're changing your strings, because it takes a little bit of getting used to, and also kind of like for the metally sound to wear off, I would say change it about maybe a week before you perform in a gig, so that you be very comfortable and that the sound will be exactly where you want it. So tip number 3, as I said, change your strings, you know, kind of spoil your guitar a little bit. They're worth it. Okay, so tip number 4 may again seem obvious to some of you, sometimes a bit overlooked perhaps, but play super, 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 super in time. Playing in time will make you sound better. When you play something and you didn't practice it enough, or you're not experienced with it enough, and you're not playing it in time with the drummer, with the metronome, with the click, it's not gonna sound good. It really is that simple. So practice playing in time. And you know, playing in time, or just playing bass in general, we don't have to play a lot of notes to sound good. There's a lot of bass lines, especially a lot of famous bass lines when you think about it, that are so simple and so sparse, you know, but they sound so good because they fit right in with the beat. So for that occasion, I made you a bass line that is really very, very simple. It's actually only made from 2 notes. It's made from the tonic and the flat 7. And then I do some fills in between, but just to show you that even with 2 notes, you can make a bass line sound awesome. Okay, so as you can see, this is a very, very simple bass line, and it may look very easy to play, right? But it's not very easy to play, okay? So if you are people who like to play in odd meters, that's awesome. But I want you to not overlook that 4/4. Even the most simple grooves are very, very, very hard to lay down straight, you know, super accurate right at the beat. It's true that, you know, when we come to the studio now, people can just like move things slightly to make it tight, but there's nothing like really sitting that bass line right on the beat live. Okay? Now here's how you know what you need to work on when you're working with time. Okay, so for example, you can take that example and play it. Record yourself, whether it's your phone, whether you can hook it up to some sort of interface and record yourself like that. Do it and then see exactly where you stand. And I can pretty much guarantee that you will encounter some surprises over there. Every time that I need to perform something or record something, I just record myself by myself in my studio and kind of see where I'm at and see, oh, you know what, I'm actually a little bit, you know, rushing this, or I'm taking this a little bit late and I'm working on those specific spots. Don't overlook the simple beats. Treat every single bass line with respect and try to really nail it on time. Okay, so tip number 5 is learn how to use different techniques in your bass playing and then use it sparsely. Okay, so that kind of like the umbrella of different techniques can have slapping under it, or tapping, or playing with a pick, or muting, or pull-offs, or hammer-ons, or anything that you could think that has like this, you know, very specific uniqueness to it, and then use it only when appropriate. Okay, so if you just learn slapping, before you go on stage and you start slapping around, think, oh, should this really be in the song if this is an 80s pop ballad? Maybe, I don't know. But like really try to think of, okay, I learned this, now I need to be responsible and do it only in the place where this is appropriate. Okay, now what I want to show you that actually is like this really cool little trick is that you don't have to play slap only in a song that requires slap from the beginning to end. You can actually play a cool bass line and then kind of give a little slap to it to make it a little bit crunchier. Same thing you can do with muting. Of course, with, you know, things like playing with a pick, it's a little bit more complicated to put it right in the middle, but you never know. You can be creative, and if you feel like you can change the sound within the song and actually help the song develop also by creating some different, styles and flavors and spice up your bass line, then, do so. Again, it's another place that you can have very specific notes and put your creativity and your interpretation as a bass player to use. So I'm gonna take that bass line that I was playing before, showing you the very uniqueness of minimalism in bass line, and I'm gonna show you some of my favorite techniques that I like to incorporate in my bass playing. That includes a little bit of slapping, and that includes some muting style, kind of like Motown. Okay, so that was kind of combining it a little bit with slap. Again, you can choose which ones you want to slap, which ones you don't. You can do it in different techniques if you want to. The second one that I'm about to demonstrate and how this really changes completely the way that bass line sounds is I'm going to actually do some muting, kind of like the Motown style. You could play muting style just with using your left hand. In fact, if you watch some of my other videos, you can see that my hand is actually sometimes really close and not very open with positions. That's because I'm playing kind of the Motown style. So I'm trying to have a very close, punchy sound. Actually, the way that basses were built in the early 50s was in a way to kind of imitate the sound of double basses. So they were trying to make it very muted. So maybe you've seen those big ashtrays that Fender guitars used to have before. That actually had some like rubber and foam and stuff built into it so that it would sound very muffled and muted. Okay, so, I mean, if you're just doing it in the middle of a gig and it's just a momentarily thing, it's very important to kind of get your hands used to that technique. As you can see, you can play it with your thumb. Or you could just play it with your regularly with your fingers in the right hand, but really using the left hand as a muting device. Sometimes I like to use this, so this is kind of a little trick. It's not okay to use some tricks in your bass playings when you can. Of course, this also includes effects, and this even includes synth bass, depending on what the song requires, right? So I'm just going to show you a little trick with this little foam. So this is actually kind of like an AC isolator foam. Just cut a little piece of that, and I'm just going to put it right next to the pickup, just underneath. Going to squeeze it in. There we go. And then you can see that it's not completely changing the sound. It still has a pretty big resonance, but it's not as much as without. Okay? Now with that, I can also get a little bit more of the muting technique in my left hand. Of course, again, you can do it with your thumb too, but it really depends on what you want, because as you can see, the sound is very different. I'm just going to use my left hand muting technique. And, it's a kind of funny looking, but it's all about the way it sounds, right? As our video. So I'm going to show you how it sounds with some muting and some foam. If you need any help with getting your bass playing to the next level, you can find me and my lessons at lessonface.com, and you can be sure to sign up for a lesson, and we'll work on these things or any other things that you want to do with your bass playing. You do have, just reminding you, these bass lines plus the play along that I was playing with, you do have it right here on the link underneath this video. In the About section, and you're more than welcome to go ahead, practice it, and I hope that this video helped you, and I hope to see you very soon. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.